Welcome to the world united. Welcome to the world united.
I feel that's a beautiful cycle round to our panel time. We've got until just before 3:30 because 3:30 is the closing ceremony on track 1. So we've got about, let's say, still 15 minutes. And I'd first like to, before I ask a question, I just want to see, does anybody have a question of each other that's come up through the listening? And if not, as I mentioned, I have lots came up during listening to everybody.
I have a question for Eleonora, which if that's, you
Yes.
talk about the hummingbird way.
Yes,
and I'm
yes.
curious, did that come through that, I call it ayahuasca experience, that the hummingbird is your spiritual connection, that the hummingbird, like where does she come in? How did she arrive?
I mean, well, it was always there as a little girl, always loving color, always loving to move once I was able to move. It's been a journey just to discover that I was a hummingbird. I actually was called Little Bird by a woman who claimed to speak to the Pleiadians, and she did. And I used to get Little Bird a lot. My mother used to call me, I was like everywhere, dancing, always on tippy toes. So she said, parece un pajarito. That's a little bird. As a little girl, I used to love the quetzal, which is a beautiful tiny bird with a giant tail. I didn't know hummingbirds existed until I went back to Colombia and actually saw one. And in Machu Picchu, I had the experience of 5 of them. One of them actually thought I was a flower and licked my face. At that moment, I thought, I wish there was a camera, but I was there all alone. This journey was all alone. And on that journey, I cured I had fear of height. I had a lot of fears. You know, when you're 13, you get a lot of baggage. Luckily, I was given 6 of my siblings passed away. Horror for my mother. For me, it just meant less baggage, less things, less mothers, less fathers, you know, less things that didn't belong to me. So I guess when it comes to being a hummingbird, that is who I am. That's my essence.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm colorful, I'm loud, I'm noisy, and it's okay. But I also have quiet moments and tenderness, and yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
Whenever I go outside and it's a spiritual thing I'm going to do, like I go to 2 Indigenous places to meditate because the energy is so high. And these Indigenous places where rituals are being conducted and that sort of thing. And whenever I go there, I see a wagtail on the way. And I've seen wagtails in New South Wales, Victoria, everywhere I go. If I'm going outside and I'm connected to the heart, or if I'm connected to spirit, a wagtail appears on the fence, on the road, flying past. But the wagtail is important for me because the wagtail often flies and he's back where he started. And my spiritual experience is I go around in a circle and I come back to where I started from, and I finally understand what it's all about. You've got to do the journey to learn, I think. And so yes.
Yeah, that's a beautiful part of it, isn't it? It's like any of the books that are written, but when we understand in our own self, like Pearl shared as well, we have it in ourself. And when we do that, when we do the looking, not the judging or the putting down, but when we have that gratitude of self, that's our full circle. I think that's a common theme that I've heard shared, especially right now. And that importance of appreciating this it's not a microcosm, it's a macrocosm in our own body, but the influence that has on the land and the people around us. And as Pearl also shared, that importance of knowing where you're putting yourself and trusting. And I know the word trust came up quite a few times So I think next I'd just like to ask each of you, and maybe even going in the order of the presentations, a message that you would send to people who are watching this live stream right now, or those who will be continuing watching through the recordings, because the recordings will be available on the website for as long as those technologies allow us. So yeah, something to share in terms of where we're at, right now, through the beautiful, authentic stories that you've shared.
Well, I went first, so I'll share. My message is we are one. We've gathered together as one in Glasgow at the Climate Change Concert because we are one with Mother Earth. The Earth is our mother, and it's up to us to nurture the Earth. And when we nurture the Earth, we nurture ourselves. So we are one. Thank you.
Beautiful.
I'll hand over to you, Pearl.
Unmute. You need to unmute, Pearl.
Hang on.
Oh.
Oh dear.
You got it, Pearl. It's working. Yeah. Perfect.
Whenever I've shared, I haven't really shared a lot of my spiritual experiences with the land and, how I relate to all those things you've talked about, Eleonora, and what's the other lady about the heart and everything. Because I talk a lot about that when I'm talking with people about spirituality, and I'm currently putting a book together with some people that is looking into all of that. But the first time that I ever shared so in-depthly around my spiritual experiences with the land, with the birds, with the, all of that, just like the Colombian, in Colombia, when you went back, well, I've returned back to my tribal country at odd times, many times, because, as I say to people, I'm a diaspora within. So it's been easier for me to travel back to my tribal land, as much as I can. And I have done that over the years. Coming to Penrith when I was a 20-year-old, I've actually lived here now for 56 years. And but I've only just starting to call Penrith home, because home was always Cape York, Thursday Island. I'm going home, North Queensland, And but I've been able to share a lot of these stories where I was able to share them while I was working with boys at Parklea in prison. And one of the things that I found what they liked about the presentation was that I triggered in them that whole business of, first of all, we as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, we are the First Nations people of Australia, right? And one of the things is I've tried to encourage them to do exactly as, I can't see the lady's name on the thing here, the one talking about the heart.
Nicola.
Sorry, Nicola. But as I shared some of my very amazing experience, especially since my son died, my son comes back to me as a kookaburra. Okay. And when he died, I was on the phone. I remember I was telling the boys about in prison. I was on Thursday Island. He had passed away up there. That's where he's buried. And I was on the phone one day with my daughter, and she was upset down this end. She said, I'm going to drop out of, uni and come up and be up there with you. I said, no, you stay. I will come back. So I left my job and came back. But as I was on the phone with her one day, trying to, console her, this kookaburra just appeared from nowhere, and it was just flying backwards and forwards across the in front of me, sat on the frangipani tree, then came over and then kept flying backwards and forwards. And I suddenly got the message, hang on, is he trying to tell me something? Because while we were waiting for all the family to come to Thursday Island for the burial, a kookaburra sat on my clothesline the whole time until he arrived, until they arrived. And then the kookaburra hung around in the yard. I lived on a house on the top of a hill on Thursday Island. I was working with the Department of Aboriginal Affairs at the time and ATSIC. And so I had my own house and it was on a hill. But this kookaburra kept flying backwards. I finally got the message, Mum, your phone bill, stop. So I said to my daughter, forget it, it's all right. I had it, by the time I got back here, I had $1,000 phone bill.
Oh.
But an Aboriginal lady friend of mine, when I came back, when I was on my way back, she said to me, so you're going to come back? I said, yes. And I'm trying to get a job. And then the door opened at the University of Western Sydney, where they took me on as a trainee because I'd never worked at university. So that was a door that opened, that I went in and started to work with them. But my friend, an Aboriginal lady from Western Sydney here, she said to me, she said, what can I do to help? I said, oh, not much. I said, I'm just going to come back and start off. And I was telling her, oh, God, I've got this big phone bill. I said, I've got to get work. And she said, how much is the phone bill? And I told her, and she said, I've got that money. I've been saving for a car. She said, I'll give it to you. You can pay your phone bill. You can come back and start afresh. Of course, I paid it all back, you know. But the thing is, that kookaburra stopped me from going any further with that. And since then, there's been all these experiences with kookaburras. And yeah, so I keep saying, I'm sure he comes back to me as a kookaburra. And I was sharing that with someone in the supermarket the other day when I was buying a card, talking to this fellow about, I was looking for a card with a kookaburra on it. And this woman standing in line, she said, you know what? She said, my son comes back to me as a butterfly. You know? So there was this wonderful exchange of spiritual experiences that was just amazing. And, you know, I want to write about those experiences as well. I shared a lot of them in prison with the boys. And it triggered with them. They kept nudging each other. See, I told you about that cat who told me, you know, what to do when I thought I was going to, you know, die that night. And then they'd say, Aunt, yeah, I can relate to that. So I sort of, you know, got them to think more and more about those sort of things. And actually, you know, I had more interest in those sort of things in there than I had outside, because when you start talking about these things to some people, it's like I only share them when I know that people are really interested, and they're not going to go away and say, oh yeah, she thinks God speaks to her or whatever, because that's the fun people make of each other, you know.
Yeah.
And a nun friend of mine said to me, Pearl, you've got to stop saying that you hear God's voice, or you've got to stop saying that God talks to you. I said, well, I don't really say that. I just share experience, that I live my life by a call, not by anybody else's strategic plan for it. You know, if the voice says, get out of there now, I go, you know. And so, and this person said to me, this nun said to me, wonderful person who's passed on now, but one of my old favorites, she said to me, you've just got to start saying, I listen. Listen for God's voice. Wait to hear it, you know. And you never know whether it is or not, but then you test it, you discern, like we're talking about. So yeah, I'd love to talk more about this sort of stuff in other times with any of you at different times. Yeah. Thank you for letting me just go on. Sorry. Too much.
That's beautiful. I would love that we could just go on longer. And as you said, you know, these are beginnings of time. So whether it's through a podcast chat, if we're not all face to face, that's a beautiful way to share as well. Yes. They're sending a message to me on the chat that the closing has started. And I said, we're just completing up with our final couple of people's final words. So And I put the track, I put the link to the closing as well, because that's on track 1. So that's where we're up to. Yeah. Eleanor, did you have a quick word that you wanted to have as a finish?
Is that right? Am I unmuted? Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I know that all my life I have lived with spirit. My grandmother was very spiritual, and on her deathbed, my mother spoke stories about her. I never met my grandmother, but I did on my way here. And I only know that because of all sorts of things that, again, like Auntie Dot, I didn't speak about. But I do know now that we don't need ayahuasca. We don't need all these things. The veil is now gone and everything's here. And this is why we do need to be mindful. We really do have to be careful with our thoughts and in our actions specifically, because the past, the present, and the future are all together now. And I see evidence of that every day in my life, and I am grateful for my life. I have held my husband's space through all the dramas in his life, all our children, you know, and then they go. So the message that I have is just, my heart would always say to dance, to move, to do these things, but I did not have the confidence to do that at that time. And the only thing, and that's what I do, I am a confidence helper. I give people, you know, the permission. If they see me wildly dancing, it's given them an opportunity to do that. So that's what I do. And last night I've actually got someone that said, oh, I wanted a grandmother and you're it. And I thought, okay, but I'm not that old. But I don't care. I can be a grandmother and aunt, I don't mind. But the fact was that I was a good role model. And I think that that's the most important thing, that you just have to be the best you can. Every morning when you wake up and the sun greets you, you asked for the best help. And so to be disciplined to do one thing every day, that's what I ask people, because that's what got me to do things. Just to be disciplined. You know, hummingbirds find it difficult to stay still. And I have learned that. But also I was ADD and I had all sorts of learning difficulties, things that I didn't know. And it doesn't matter when you discover that or whatever, as long as you give yourself the time. And if you are not being given the time or respected by wherever you are, go, leave. Everyone must respect everyone. And there you go. Just
Perfect.
do it.
Just do it. That's an awesome one. Awesome. Now they're texting me and I said, we still have Nicola to do a last sentence and then we'll swap over to track 1.
In a nutshell, it is listen to your heart. Don't listen to your head. Allow the heart to lead. The wisdom is in here. It's not up here and it's not out there. Yes, you can take those information, ideas, advice on board, but ultimately the compass, the barometer for what is right for you is always come in and listen to your heart.
Magnificent. And there is nothing that I could say after that. I'm going to leave that. Your heart is the barometer and listen to it.
Yeah.
Greatly appreciate all of the input on today's panel and your beautiful presentations. And I look forward to the continuing of this journey as the Global Transformation Festival. So for those who would like to move over to the closing now on track 1, I've put a link to track 1 in the chat. That's probably the fastest way to get it and click on it. Otherwise, once I click over to it, I will also, I can email it or text it.
Okay.
Lovely.
That.
It's in the side. Thank
Okay.
you. In the side thing. I'll text it as well.
Hmm. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye for now.